The sun was shining brightly outside, but inside the small music room, the atmosphere was heavy and serious. 7-year-old Maya sat on the long piano bench, her legs swinging back and forth because they were too short to reach the floor. She looked like a tiny bird trapped in a cage. The room smelled of old wood and polish, a smell that Maya was starting to hate. It was a Saturday morning, and while all her friends were probably running around in the park playing tag or kicking a soccer ball, she was stuck here. Standing over her was Mr. Gherkin, her piano teacher. He was an older man with silver hair and glasses that sat on the edge of his nose. He never smiled much. He believed that music was a serious matter, not a game. Today, he seemed even stricter than usual. He held a ruler in his hand, not to hit anyone, but just to tap on the music sheet to keep the beat. "Maya, look at me," Mr. Gherkin said in a deep, firm voice. Maya didn't look up. She kept her eyes on her knees. She was determined to be the worst student he had ever had. If she was bad enough, maybe her parents would let her quit. She wanted to be outside, feeling the wind on her face, not sitting in this dusty room pressing black and white keys. "Maya," he said again, this time a little louder. "I know you can hear me. Put your hands on the keys." Maya crossed her arms tightly over her chest. "No," she whispered. "I don't want to. I want to go home." Mr. Gherkin sighed. He walked around the bench and stood right in front of her. He didn't look angry, but he looked very strong. "You have a gift, Maya. Your mother told me you hum songs perfectly before you could even talk. You have music inside you. We just need to let it out." "I don't have any music inside me," Maya argued, tears starting to well up in her eyes. "I'm empty. And I hate the piano. It's boring." Mr. Gherkin shook his head slowly. "It is only boring because you are fighting it. You are treating the piano like an enemy." "It is not an enemy. It is a friend." He reached down and gently took her small, clenched fist. Maya tried to pull away, but his grip was soft yet unbreakable. He was not hurting her, but he was not letting her go either. He was going to force her to try, just for a moment. "Open your hand," he commanded gently. "No." Maya cried out, a little louder now. "Open your hand," he repeated, calm as a rock. "Just one note. That is all I ask. Play one note, and if you really hate it after that, we will stop for today." Maya looked at him with wet eyes. She didn't believe him, but she was tired of fighting. She slowly uncurled her fingers. Mr. Gherkin took her index finger and placed it on the white C key in the middle of the piano. "Push," he said. Maya took a deep breath and pushed down. A clear, bright bell-like tone filled the silent room. It was a beautiful sound, pure and clean. For a split second, Maya stopped crying. She looked at the key, then at the vibrating string inside the piano. The sound seemed to hang in the air like magic. But then she remembered that she was supposed to be angry. She pulled her hand back quickly. "There. I did it. Can I go now?" Mr. Gherkin looked at her for a long moment. He saw the stubbornness in her eyes, but he also saw something else. He saw a spark. Most children would just bang on the keys to make noise. Maya had struck the key with a strange kind of care, even when she was angry. "Not yet," Mr. Gherkin said softly. He walked back to his chair and sat down. "You played one note. Now, I want you to play four. Just C, D, E, and F. I will help you." "I don't know where they are," Maya shouted. I will show you, he said. He reached out and took her right hand again. This time, Maya didn't pull away as hard. She was tired. Mr. Gherkin placed her fingers on the 4 keys one by one. 1, 2, 3, 4, he counted. Now, play them. Slowly. Maya looked at her fingers. They looked so small on the big keys. She felt trapped. She felt like everyone was making her do things she didn't want to do. Why couldn't she just be a normal kid who played outside? Why did she have to have this gift that her mother talked about? She didn't feel special. She felt miserable. With an angry huff, she pressed down her fingers. C, D, E, F. The notes rang out, one after another. It wasn't perfect. Her timing was a bit off because she was trying to play fast to get it over with. But even with the bad timing, the sound was smooth. Her fingers were naturally curved, just like a professional player's. Mr. Gherkin raised an eyebrow. Again, he said. But slower this time. Feel the weight of your arm dropping into the keys. I don't want to feel the weight. Maya yelled. I just want to go. You will go when you do it properly, Mr. Gherkin said. His voice was not mean, but it was as hard as stone. He was not going to let her leave until she gave him a tiny bit of effort. He was forcing her to focus. Maya gritted her teeth. She looked at the door, wishing it would open. But it stayed closed. She looked back at the keys. Fine, she thought. If I play it his way, maybe he will let me leave. She took a breath. She relaxed her shoulders just a little bit. She let her arm feel heavy, like a bag of sand, and she let her fingers drop. C, D, E, F. This time, the melody was singing. It was simple, just 4 notes, but it sounded like the beginning of a song. Mr. Gherkin smiled, just a tiny bit. You see, you have the touch. You have soft hands. You are not banging. You are caressing the sound. Maya wiped her eyes with her sleeve. It's just stupid notes, she mumbled. No, Mr. Gherkin said, standing up again. It is not stupid. It is the start of something big. But you are too busy being angry to see it. He walked to the window and looked out at the sunny day. I know you want to be outside, Maya. I know you want to play soccer. But the soccer ball will always be there. This talent you have, if you don't water it, it will dry up and blow away like a dead leaf. He turned back to face her. I am going to be hard on you. I am going to make you play when you don't want to. I am going to make you practice until your fingers hurt. Because one day, you will walk into a room, and you will sit down at a piano, and everyone will stop talking. Everyone will listen. And you will thank me. Maya stared at him. He sounded crazy. She couldn't imagine a world where people stopped talking just to hear her play. She just wanted to kick a ball. Are we done? She asked, her voice tired. Mr. Gherkin looked at the clock on the wall. We are done for today. But next week, Maya, next week, we work on the scales. And I won't let you give up so easily. Maya jumped off the bench and grabbed her backpack. She ran to the door. As she opened it, she heard Mr. Gherkin speak one last time. Practice those 4 notes before you sleep, he called out. Just 4 notes. Maya didn't answer. She ran out of the room and down the hallway. She ran out of the building and into the fresh air. She took a deep breath and smiled. She was free. But as she walked home, kicking a stone along the sidewalk, she found herself humming a little tune. It was just 4 notes. C, D, E, F. She shook her head to get the tune out of her mind, but it stuck there, playing over and over again. She didn't understand it, but the music had already grabbed hold of her, and no matter how hard she tried to run away, it wasn't going to let her go. The following week felt like a punishment to Maya. Every day after school, while the other kids ran out to the playground to laugh, shout, and play games, Maya had to walk slowly toward the music room. The heavy door seemed to look like a mouth waiting to swallow her up. She dragged her feet, making as much noise as possible on the linoleum floors, hoping that if she acted like enough of a troublemaker, Mr. Gherkin would tell her to leave and never come back. But he never did. He just waited, sitting on his chair with his back straight, watching the clock with the patience of a stone statue. Inside the room, the routine was always the same. The air was always a little bit too warm, and the smell of old paper made Maya feel sleepy and grumpy at the same time. Mr. Gherkin would point to the piano bench, and Maya would stomp over to it and sit down. She would slouch her shoulders and let her arms hang limp like wet noodles. She wanted him to see that she had no energy, no talent, and absolutely no desire to be there. She thought that if she looked bored enough, he would get bored too. But Mr. Gherkin had eyes like a hawk. He noticed everything. He noticed how Maya's fingers would sometimes twitch when she heard a car horn outside that played a melody. He noticed how she tapped her foot in a complicated rhythm when she thought he wasn't looking. He saw that her boredom was actually just a wall she had built to keep the world out. Posture, Maya, he would say, tapping her back gently with his hand. Sit up like a queen, not like a potato. Maya would sigh loudly, a dramatic sound meant to show her suffering, and she would straighten her back for exactly 2 seconds before slumping down again. Do we have to do scales again? She would whine. Scales are so boring. They go up and down, up and down. It makes me dizzy. Scales are the bricks we use to build a castle, Mr. Gherkin would answer calmly. You cannot build a roof without the walls. Now, C major. Slowly. For weeks, this was their war. Maya would fight him with silences, with sighs, and with slow, sloppy playing. She would hit the wrong keys on purpose, making the piano sound like it was falling apart. Clunk, screech, bang. She waited for him to get angry. She waited for him to yell. But Mr. Gherkin never raised his voice. He would just stop her, take her hand, fix her finger position, and make her play the note again. You are playing like you are hitting a nail into a wall, he told her one afternoon. The piano is not a hammer. It is a voice. You must sing with your fingers. I don't want to sing, Maya snapped. I want to be quiet. You are never quiet, Maya, Mr. Gherkin said softly. Even when you are not speaking, your hands are telling me something. Then came the rainy Tuesday. The sky outside was dark gray, and rain was beating against the window pane like 1,000 tiny fingers. The gloomy weather matched Maya's mood perfectly. She had had a terrible day at school, spilling her juice at lunch and forgetting her homework. She walked into the music room feeling like a storm cloud ready to burst. Mr. Gherkin didn't have her open her usual scale book. Instead, he pulled a thick, black book from the shelf and placed it on the music stand. The pages looked yellow and old. The notes on the page were black and crowded together, looking like a swarm of ants. There were sharps and flats everywhere, symbols that Maya didn't understand yet. What is this? Maya asked, wrinkling her nose. It looks scary. This is a piece of music, Mr. Gherkin said. It is called The Storm. It is difficult. Very difficult. Much too hard for a beginner. Then why are you showing it to me? Maya asked, confused. I can't read that. I don't know what those squiggly lines mean. I know you can't read it, Mr. Gherkin said, looking at her over his glasses. But I want you to look at it. I want you to see how it moves. Look at the notes going up, high and sharp, and then crashing down low. Can you imagine the sound? Maya looked at the page. She didn't know how to read the music, but she could see the shapes. The notes on the right side went high up the staff, and then on the next line, they dropped all the way to the bottom. It looked like a roller coaster. It looked like excitement. It looked a little bit like how she felt inside when she was angry. It looks like it goes fast, Maya said quietly. Yes, very fast, Mr. Gherkin nodded. And very loud. He stood up and walked away from the piano. He stood by the window, looking out at the rain, leaving Maya alone on the bench. This was unusual. He always stood right next to her to correct her mistakes. Play it, he said, his back to her. Maya laughed out loud. Are you joking? I told you, I can't read that. I will just mess it up. I don't care if you mess it up, Mr. Gherkin said, his voice echoing slightly in the room. I don't want you to read it. I want you to play it. Play what you think it sounds like. Look at the notes jumping up and down. Make the piano sound like the rain outside. Maya stared at his back. He was crazy. He was absolutely crazy. She sat there for a minute, her hands hovering over the keys. She felt a strange feeling in her chest. It was a mix of anger and curiosity. She was angry that he was asking her to do the impossible, but she was curious to know if she could make a noise that sounded like the rain. She looked at the black notes on the page again. They looked aggressive. They looked sharp. Maya felt a sudden burst of frustration, not just at the piano, but at her bad day, at the rain, at being stuck inside. She wanted to scream. Instead, she lifted her hands and brought them down hard on the keys. Bang! The sound was jarring and loud. It wasn't a musical chord, it was just noise. Maya expected Mr. Gherkin to turn around and scold her for banging. But he didn't move. Good, he said calmly. Keep going. Don't think. Just hit it. Maya was surprised. She hit the keys again, this time moving her hands to the left, where the low, thunderous notes were. She played a cluster of notes, dark and rumbling. It sounded like the thunder outside. She felt a shiver go down her spine. It wasn't a pretty sound, but it was a real sound. It matched the heavy feeling in her stomach. Then, she saw a part of the music where the notes went high and light, like little splashes. Without thinking, her right hand flew to the high end of the keyboard. She played fast, light notes, letting them tinkle like raindrops hitting a puddle. Suddenly, the piano wasn't a boring machine anymore. It was a tool. It was a way to let the storm out of her body. She started playing louder and faster, her hands moving up and down the keyboard, trying to chase the feeling she saw on the paper. She wasn't playing the right notes. She wasn't following the rhythm. But she was playing with intensity. She was leaning forward, her hair falling in her face, biting her lip in concentration. For the first time, she wasn't counting 1, 2, 3. She wasn't worrying about curved fingers. She was just pouring her energy into the instrument. She let out all her frustration about the soccer game she missed, the juice she spilled, and the scales she hated. The piano roared back at her, vibrating against her legs, shaking the floor, and then, with a final crash of her hands in the low bass register, Maya stopped. She sat there, breathing hard, her heart pounding in her chest. The last notes echoed in the room and then faded into silence. She looked up, feeling a little bit scared. She thought she had broken a rule. She thought she had been bad. She looked at Mr. Gherkin. He was still standing by the window, but now he was turned around, looking at her. He wasn't frowning. He wasn't smiling, exactly, but his eyes were wide. He looked like he had just seen a ghost, but in a good way. He walked slowly back to the piano. He didn't say anything for a long time. He just looked at Maya, and then he looked at the piano keys, as if they were something brand new. "Maya," he said quietly. "That was not the music on the page." "I know," Maya said quickly, putting her hands in her lap. "I messed it up. I told you I couldn't read it." "You didn't mess it up," Mr. Gherkin whispered. He leaned in closer. "You played the emotion. You played the storm. You were wrong about the notes, Maya, but you were right about the soul." He reached out and gently brushed a stray hair away from her forehead. "I have been teaching for 40 years, he said. "Most students play the notes. They play what is written. But you just played a feeling. You have something inside you that is very rare. And very loud." Maya didn't know what to say. She felt hot in her face. She looked down at her hands. They were trembling a little bit, but not from fear. They felt warm, like they had just been running. "Do it again," Mr. Gherkin said. Now Maya asked. "Yes. But this time, try to find the melody. Try to hear the song inside the noise." He pointed to the page. "I will teach you the notes next week. But for today, you played exactly what I needed to hear." Maya looked at the rainy window. She didn't want to go outside anymore. She looked back at the keys. They didn't look like boring teeth anymore. They looked like they were waiting for her to speak again. She took a deep breath and put her hands back on the cold ivory. The silence in the room wasn't empty anymore, it was full of possibilities. That rainy Tuesday was a turning point that Maya didn't see coming, but Mr. Gherkin did. After she had banged on the piano in frustration and created that storm of sound, something inside her had cracked open. The wall she had built to keep the music out was broken. When she walked into her lesson the next week, she didn't stomp her feet. She didn't slump over the bench like a sack of potatoes. She actually sat down and looked at the keys with a little bit of curiosity, like they were a puzzle she suddenly wanted to solve. Mr. Gherkin noticed the change immediately. He didn't say, "I told you so," or smile smugly. He simply took the storm music book and opened it to the first page. "All right," he said, his voice businesslike. "You know what the song sounds like in your head. Now we have to make your fingers do what your brain wants." For the next month, the forcing changed. It wasn't about forcing her to sit on the bench anymore, it was about forcing her fingers to be stronger and faster. Mr. Gherkin became a drill sergeant. He made her practice the same 5 measures over and over again. If she made a mistake, she had to stop and do it again. And again. And again. "Stop!" Mr. Gherkin would shout, slamming his hand on the top of the piano to stop her. "Your 4th finger is weak. You are playing like a butterfly. Play like a tiger. Put some weight into it." Maya's hands began to hurt. Her fingers felt sore and stiff when she woke up in the morning. There were days when she hated Mr. Gherkin again. There were days when she wanted to throw the heavy music book at him. She would complain to her mother at dinner. "He makes me play the same thing 50 times. It's boring. My hands hurt." But her mother just smiled and passed her the potatoes. "He is strict because he knows you can do it, Maya. Just keep going." What Maya didn't realize was that she was secretly starting to enjoy the hard work. It sounds strange, but there was a satisfaction in getting it right. When she played a difficult line of music perfectly, and the notes flowed like water instead of stumbling like rocks, she felt a little spark of joy in her chest. It was a feeling better than scoring a goal in soccer, better than eating candy. It was the feeling of conquering something difficult. She stopped leaving her soccer ball in the hallway. It sat in the corner of her room, gathering dust. When her friends knocked on the door to ask her to come out and play, she found herself saying, "Maybe later. I have to practice first." Her friends were confused. "Since when do you like practicing?" they asked. "I don't know," Maya would say, shrugging. But she did know. She just didn't want to admit it. Mr. Gherkin pushed her harder than any of his other students. While other children were playing simple, happy little tunes about rabbits and sunshine, Mr. Gherkin gave Maya music that was dark and complicated. He gave her music that told stories about sadness and anger, about castles and dragons. He told her, "You have an old soul, Maya. You don't need to play children's songs. You need to play real music." One afternoon, about 2 months after the rainy day, Maya was struggling with a section of the song where the left hand had to jump quickly from the low end of the piano to the high end. She kept missing the note. She kept landing on 2 keys at once, making a muddy sound. She groaned in frustration and slammed her fists on her knees. "I can't do it," she yelled. "My hands are too small. I'm not good enough." Mr. Gherkin was sitting in his corner chair, reading a newspaper. He lowered the paper slowly and looked at her. "You are lying to yourself," he said. "I am not," Maya argued, her face turning red. "Yes, you are," Mr. Gherkin said. He stood up and walked over to her. "You are not failing because your hands are small. You are failing because you are scared." Maya looked at him, surprised. "Scared of what? It's just a piano." "You are scared of the sound," Mr. Gherkin said. "You are playing quietly because you don't want to make a mistake. You are being shy with the instrument. You have to be brave. You have to hit that note like you mean it. If you miss it, you miss it. But you have to commit to it." He leaned down close to her ear. "Don't ask for permission to play the piano, Maya. Take it." He walked back to his chair and picked up his newspaper. "Again. And this time, don't be a polite little girl. Be a musician." Maya sat there for a moment, letting his words sink in. She looked at her hands. They were small, yes, but they were strong. She had been practicing every day. Her fingers were calloused on the tips. She took a deep breath. She closed her eyes for a second and imagined the sound she wanted to make big, bold, and clear. She lifted her hands. She didn't hesitate. She brought her left hand down on the low notes, then quickly, without looking, she jumped her hand up the keyboard. She didn't tap the key gently, she struck it. Bam! It was perfect. The note rang out, clear and loud, exactly the right sound. It shocked her. She continued playing, her confidence growing. She wasn't thinking about the notes on the page anymore, she was just playing. She played the fast parts, the slow parts, the loud and the quiet parts. She was aggressive. She was powerful. She was playing with the fire that Mr. Gherkin had forced her to find. When she finished the song, she was breathing hard, like she had just run a race. She looked at Mr. Gherkin. He had put his newspaper down. He was looking at the piano, not at her. That, he said quietly, was music. Maya felt a warmth spread through her chest. It was the best feeling she had ever had. From that day on, Maya changed. She started waking up early to practice before school. She started listening to music on the radio differently, trying to pick out the piano part. The piano wasn't a cage anymore. It was a place where she could be big. In real life, she was just a little kid who had to listen to adults and follow rules. But at the piano, she was in charge. She could make the room shake. She could make the air vibrate. She could make people feel things. Mr. Gherkin was still tough. He still made her play scales until she wanted to scream. But now, Maya understood why. It was like exercising a muscle. The more she worked, the stronger her music became. One evening, Maya's parents were in the kitchen washing dishes. They could hear the piano playing from the living room. Usually, when a child practices, it sounds like a mess. It sounds like chopping wood. But tonight, the sound that drifted into the kitchen was smooth and flowing. It was the song Mr. Gherkin had given her, the difficult one. Maya's dad stopped washing a plate and looked at his wife. "Is that Maya?" he asked, whispering like he was afraid to stop the music. Her mom wiped her hands on a towel and listened. A smile spread across her face. "Yes," she said softly. "That's Maya." They didn't say anything else. They just stood there and listened. They could hear the power in her playing. They could hear that she wasn't just hitting notes, she was telling a story. It was a story about strength, about growing up, about finding a voice when you didn't think you had one. Maya didn't know her parents were listening. She was lost in her own world. She was thinking about what Mr. Gherkin had said. "Don't ask for permission." She struck the final chord of the song and let it ring out until the sound faded into nothingness. She sat there in the quiet room, her hands resting on the keys. She didn't feel like the same girl who had walked into this room crying months ago. She felt different. She felt older. She felt ready for whatever Mr. Gherkin was going to throw at her next. She didn't know it yet, but he was preparing her for something much bigger than a living room recital. He was preparing her for the world. The day of the annual school recital finally arrived. It was the biggest event of the year for the music school, a time when parents dressed up in their best clothes and students polished their shoes until they shined. The auditorium was a large, dusty room with a high ceiling and heavy velvet curtains that smelled like old times. Rows upon rows of wooden chairs were set up, and by the time the performance was about to begin, almost every seat was filled. The air buzzed with the sound of people whispering, babies crying, and candy wrappers crinkling. Backstage, in a small room that smelled of hairspray and nervousness, Maya sat on a hard folding chair. She was wearing a simple velvet dress that her mother had bought her specifically for this occasion. It was dark blue, the color of the night sky, and her hair was pulled back tightly with a ribbon. She looked very small and very fragile in the big, empty room. Around her, other children were pacing back and forth. Some were trembling, others were laughing nervously, and a few were crying quietly because they had forgotten their music. Maya didn't look like she was going to cry. In fact, she looked very still, almost like a statue. But inside, her stomach was doing flip-flops. Her hands felt cold and clammy. She kept wiping them on her dress, trying to dry them off. She had practiced her piece, The Storm, 1,000 times. She knew every note, every pause, and every change in volume. But knowing it in the safety of Mr. Gherkin's small studio was different from playing it in front of 200 people. Mr. Gherkin walked into the room. He was wearing a tuxedo that looked a little bit too big for him, and he had his music score tucked under his arm. He looked around the room at the nervous children. He walked over to Maya and crouched down so he was looking her in the eye. "Are you afraid?" he asked her. His voice was low and serious, not like the comforting tone parents usually use. Maya nodded slowly. "Yes," she whispered. "What if I forget the notes? What if my hands shake? There are so many people out there." Mr. Gherkin reached out and gently tapped her chest, right over her heart. "Do not play for the people," he told her. "The people out there, they are just noise. They are just bodies in chairs. If you play to impress them, you will fail. You have to play for the music. You have to play for the storm." He stood up and adjusted his bow tie. "Remember what I taught you. Don't ask for permission. Take the piano." A few minutes later, a teacher poked her head into the room. "Maya, you are next." Maya stood up. Her legs felt like they were made of lead. She walked toward the heavy curtain that separated the backstage area from the stage. She could hear the polite applause as the little boy before her finished his song. He bowed awkwardly and ran off the stage. The announcer's voice boomed through the speakers, "And now, please welcome Maya to play the piano." Maya took a deep breath and stepped through the curtain. The stage was bright, blindingly bright. Large spotlights shone down on the shiny black grand piano sitting in the center of the stage. Maya couldn't see the audience very well because of the lights, but she could feel them. She could hear the shifting of feet and the quiet murmurs of 200 people waiting. She walked across the wooden floor, her shoes making a soft clicking sound. When she reached the piano bench, she had to climb up a little bit because she was still so small. She sat down and smoothed her dress. She looked at the keys. They looked white and clean, waiting for her. She placed her fingers on the starting notes but didn't press down yet. The silence in the room was heavy. It felt like the whole world was holding its breath. For a second, panic rose in her throat. She remembered all the times she had hated the piano, all the times she had wanted to quit. Why did she agree to do this? She could just stand up and run away. But then, she thought about Mr. Gherkin standing in the wings. She thought about the rainy afternoon when she first played with anger. She closed her eyes for a split second, remembered his voice saying, "Play like a tiger." Maya opened her eyes and lifted her hands. She wasn't Maya the scared little girl anymore. She was the musician. She brought her hands down. The first chord was not polite. It was an explosion. It was a crash of thunder that filled the entire auditorium. Many people in the audience jumped in their seats. They were expecting a sweet, simple song from a small child. They were not expecting this. The sound was powerful and aggressive. It grabbed everyone's attention instantly. Maya's hands moved across the keyboard with a speed and strength that seemed impossible for someone her size. She played the fast, running notes with her right hand while her left hand kept a heavy, stomping rhythm. She was aggressive. She leaned into the piano, her face serious, her body swaying with the music. She didn't look like a child pretending to be a musician, she looked like a master at work. The music told a story. It started with the anger and frustration she had felt when she was forced to practice. It was dark and moody. Then, the music changed. It became lighter, faster, like rain dancing on a roof. Her fingers flew up the high end of the keyboard, tinkling like bells. It was beautiful, but it was still intense. There was no wasted movement. Every note meant something. In the third row, a mother who had been checking her phone stopped and looked up. Her mouth opened slightly. She put her phone away, her eyes glued to the small girl on stage. In the back, a man who had fallen asleep during the previous performance woke up with a start. He rubbed his eyes, wondering what instrument was making such a rich, full sound. Maya was lost in the music. She couldn't see the audience anymore. She couldn't feel the lights. All she could feel was the vibration of the strings under her fingers. She was remembering the months of hard work, the sore fingers, and Mr. Gherkin's strict voice. She was playing all of that frustration and all of that joy into the song. She reached the climax of the piece, the part where the music became chaotic and loud. Her hands were crossing over each other, moving up and down the keyboard. It looked difficult, complicated, and dangerous. Then, suddenly, the chaos stopped. The music dropped into a deep, quiet section. Maya played softly, her hands barely touching the keys. The room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. The contrast between the loud noise and the sudden softness was breathtaking. She played the final phrase, a slow, descending melody that sounded like the storm clearing up. Her hands moved to the lowest notes on the piano. She struck the final two notes, a deep, resonant boom that echoed through the hall. And then, she lifted her hands off the keys and placed them in her lap. Maya sat there, breathing hard. Her chest was rising and falling. She stared at the music stand, waiting for her heart to stop racing. For 3 seconds, there was absolute silence. No one moved. No one clapped. The audience was stunned. They were looking at the small girl in the blue dress, wondering how such a big sound could come from such a small person. They had expected a cute performance. They had witnessed a transformation. It was as if they had forgotten she was a child. Then, a man in the front row stood up. He started clapping. Slowly at first, then louder. Then, the entire front row stood up. Then the second row. Within seconds, the whole auditorium was on its feet. The applause wasn't just polite clapping, it was a roar. People were shouting, "Bravo!" and "Amazing!" Maya blinked and looked out into the darkness. She couldn't see their faces clearly because of the lights, but she could hear them. They were cheering for her. A shy smile crept across her face. She stood up, smoothed her dress again, and bowed deeply. As she straightened up, she looked toward the side of the stage, into the wings where the shadows were. Standing there, almost invisible in the darkness, was Mr. Gherkin. He wasn't clapping. He wasn't cheering. He was just standing there with his arms crossed, watching her. But as the applause washed over the stage, Maya saw him lift his chin and give her the smallest, proudest nod. It was a look that said, "You did it. You finally heard the music." Maya smiled at him, then turned back to the audience and bowed one more time. She walked off the stage, her heart feeling lighter than it had ever felt before. She knew she wasn't the same girl who walked into the music room wanting to play soccer. She was a pianist now. And there was no going back. The heavy velvet curtains closed, shutting out the blinding stage lights and the hundreds of staring eyes. For a moment, Maya was standing in the dark, backstage, and the only thing she could hear was her own heartbeat thumping loudly in her ears like a drum. It felt like the world had stopped spinning. Her hands were trembling slightly, not from fear this time, but from the rush of energy that was still flowing through her body. She could still feel the vibration of the piano keys against her fingertips. Then, from the other side of the curtain, the silence broke. It wasn't just polite clapping, it was a wave of sound that crashed against the stage walls. People were stomping their feet, cheering, and shouting. It was a noise that said they had not just watched a performance, they had felt something. The sheer volume of the applause made the floorboards under Maya's feet seem to vibrate. A teacher who was standing nearby opened the curtain just a tiny crack to peek out, and her eyes went wide. "Maya," the teacher whispered, her voice full of shock. "They are standing up. The whole room is standing up." Maya didn't know what to do. She felt a blush rise up her neck and heat up her cheeks. She looked around for her parents and saw them rushing toward her, their eyes wet with tears. Her father swept her up into a hug, lifting her feet off the ground. "You were amazing," he shouted over the noise. "I couldn't believe that was you." Her mother was crying happy tears as she hugged her. "It was beautiful, Maya. It was so powerful. Where did that come from?" Maya looked over her mother's shoulder, searching the dim backstage area. She saw him standing in the shadow of a large speaker stack. Mr. Gherkin was still wearing his slightly too big tuxedo. He wasn't hugging anyone. He wasn't clapping. He just stood there with his arms crossed over his chest, watching the scene with a calm, steady look on his face. When Maya's eyes met his, he didn't smile broadly, but he gave her a slow, single nod. It was a small gesture, but to Maya, it meant more than all the cheering in the world. It was his stamp of approval. It was the sign that she had passed the test. After the excitement died down and people started to leave the auditorium, Maya found herself standing alone near the piano bench. The crowd had thinned out, but a few people were still lingering, wanting to catch a glimpse of the little girl who had played like a professional. A tall man with a gray beard and a notebook walked up to her. He looked serious and important. "Excuse me, young lady," he said, bending down so he was on her level. "I write for the city newspaper. I have been coming to these recitals for 20 years. I have never heard a child play with that much emotion. You play like you have lived a lifetime already." Maya didn't know what to say. She just looked at her shoes. "Thank you," she mumbled. "Who is your teacher?" the man asked. "They must be brilliant to have taught you that." Maya pointed to the back of the room where Mr. Gherkin was packing his sheet music into a bag. The man looked surprised. "Mr. Gherkin, he is known for being very tough. He has scared away many students." Maya looked at the man and smiled a genuine smile. "He didn't scare me," she said softly. "He made me listen." A few minutes later, Maya and her parents walked out of the building into the cool night air. The street lights were flickering on, and the stars were beginning to shine above them. Maya took a deep breath. The air smelled like rain and pavement. It felt good to be outside, but strangely, she didn't want to run and jump around like she used to. She felt calm. She felt heavy, in a good way, like she was carrying something precious inside her. As they walked to the car, her father put a hand on her shoulder. "So," he said, "what do you want to do tomorrow since the recital is over? Do you want to go to the park? Maybe we can sign you up for that soccer camp you wanted." Maya stopped walking. She looked at the park across the street. She saw the soccer nets and the empty field. It looked fun, but it also looked small. She thought about the piano. She thought about the way the music could make her feel huge and important. She thought about the storm she had created on stage and how it had silenced everyone. No, Maya said, shaking her head. I don't want to do soccer camp. Her parents looked at each other, confused. You don't? Her mom asked. But you loved soccer. You fought so hard to play. I know, Maya said. She looked up at the sky. But I think I found something I love more. The piano. It's hard. Mr. Gherkin makes me work until my hands hurt. But when I play, I don't feel like a kid anymore. I feel like I can do anything. She looked back at the school building. I want to keep learning. I want to get better. Her father laughed and squeezed her shoulder. I never thought I would hear the day my daughter would choose piano over soccer. But if that is what you want, we support you. Mr. Gherkin must be a magician to change your mind. He's not a magician, Maya said wisely as they got into the car. He's just strict. And he was right. The music was there all along. I just had to stop fighting it. The next week, Maya walked into the music room for her regular lesson. It felt different this time. The room didn't smell like old paper and boredom anymore. It smelled like possibility. The dust motes dancing in the sunlight looked like magic. She walked over to the piano bench and sat down. She didn't have to be forced to sit up straight. She did it automatically. Mr. Gherkin came out of his office. He didn't ask her how the recital went, and he didn't congratulate her on the applause. He didn't believe in dwelling on the past. He just walked over, placed a new, thick book on the stand, and opened it to the first page. It was harder than the last one. The notes were smaller, and the rhythms were more complex. You played well, he said simply, his voice gravelly. But the applause is dangerous. Maya looked at him, surprised. Dangerous how? Because it makes you think you have finished, Mr. Gherkin said, tapping the page. When people clap, you think you are the best. But you are not the best yet. You are just a beginner who knows how to make noise. Now, the real work begins. He pointed to a section of the music that looked incredibly difficult. This requires a hand span of an octave. Your hands are small. It will hurt. You will have to stretch until it feels like your muscles are tearing. Maya looked at the music. She looked at the impossible jumps and the fast runs. A year ago, she would have cried. She would have run out of the room. But now, she looked at the challenge and felt a spark of excitement. She knew that Mr. Gherkin was right. The applause was nice, but it was gone. The music was forever. She placed her hands on the keys. She stretched her fingers until she felt the pull in her palm. It was uncomfortable, but she didn't pull back. I'm ready, Maya said. Her voice didn't waver. She wasn't the scared little girl who hated the piano. She wasn't even the girl who wanted to play soccer. She was a musician. Mr. Gherkin looked at her, and for the first time, a very small, almost invisible smile touched the corner of his lips. He walked to his chair and sat down. Begin, he said. Maya took a deep breath, closed her eyes for a split second to find a quiet place inside her, and then she began to play. The room filled with sound again, but this time, it wasn't a storm. It was something stronger. It was the sound of a girl who had found her voice and was never going to let it be silenced again. And as the music grew, Mr. Gherkin sat back, closed his eyes, and finally, he just listened.